Hello, this is R.J. Deacon reading the Supreme Court of the United States opinion syllabus in Manhattan Community Access Corporation versus Halleck. Certiorari to the United States Court of Appeals for the Second Circuit. Argued February 25th, 2019. Decided June 17th, 2019. New York state law requires cable operators to set aside channels on their cable systems for public access. Those channels are operated by the cable operator unless the local government chooses to itself operate the channels or designate a private entity to operate the channels. New York City, the city, has designated a private nonprofit corporation, Petitioner Manhattan Neighborhood Network, to operate the public access channels on Time Warner's cable system in Manhattan. Respondents, Dee Halleck and Jesus Papaleto Melendez, produced a film critical of MNN to be aired on MNN's public access channels. MNN televised the film. MNN later suspended Halleck and Melendez from all MNN services and facilities. The producers sued, claiming that MNN violated their First Amendment free speech rights when it restricted their access to the public access channels because of the content of their film. The district court dismissed the claim on the grounds that MNN is not a state actor and therefore is not subject to First Amendment constraints on its editorial discretion. Reversing in relevant part, the Second Circuit concluded that MNN is a state actor subject to First Amendment constraints. The Supreme Court held the decision below is reversed in part and remanded. Justice Kavanaugh delivered the opinion of the court. Held, MNN is not a state actor subject to the First Amendment. The Free Speech Clause of the First Amendment prohibits only governmental, not private abridgment of speech. See Denver Area Telecommunications Consortium versus FCC. This court's state action doctrine distinguishes the government from individuals and private entities. A private entity may qualify as a state actor when, as relevant here, the entity exercises powers traditionally exclusively reserved to the state. See Jackson versus Metropolitan Edison Corporation. The court has stressed that very few functions fall into that category. Flagbros versus Brooks. The relevant function in this case, operation of a public access channel on a cable system, has not traditionally and exclusively been performed by the government. Since the 1970s, a variety of private and public actors have operated public access channels. Early Manhattan public access channels were operated by private cable operators with some help from private nonprofit organizations. That practice continued until the early 1990s when MNN began to operate the channels. Operating public access channels on a cable system is not a traditional exclusive public function. The producers contend that the relevant function here is more generally the operation of a public forum for speech, which they claim is a traditional exclusive public function. But that analysis mistakenly ignores the threshold state action question. Providing some kind of forum for speech is not an activity that only government entities have traditionally performed. Therefore, a private entity who provides a forum for speech is not transformed by that fact alone into a state actor. See Hudgens versus NLRB. The producers note that the city has designated MNN to operate the public access channels on Time Warner's cable system, and that the state heavily regulates MNN with respect to those channels, but the city's designation is analogous to a government license, a government contract, or a government-granted monopoly, none of which converts a private entity into a state actor, unless the private entity is performing a traditional exclusive public function. See San Francisco Arts and Athletics Incorporated versus United States Olympic Commission. And the fact that MNN is subject to the state's extensive regulation does not by itself convert its action into that of the state. That's Jackson. The producers alternatively contend that the public access channels are actually the city's property and that MNN is essentially managing government property on the city's behalf. But the city does not own or lease the public access channels and does not possess any formal easement or other property interests in the channels. It does not matter that a provision in the franchise agreements between the city and Time Warner allowed the city to designate a private entity to operate the public access channels on Time Warner's cable system. Nothing in the agreements suggests that the city possesses any property interest in the cable system or in the public access channels on that system. The decision below is reversed in part and remanded. Justice Kavanaugh delivered the opinion of the court in which Chief Justice Roberts and Justices Thomas, Alito, and Gorsuch joined. Justice Sotomayor filed a dissenting opinion in which Justices Ginsburg, Breyer, and Kagan joined. Thank you for listening. If you'd like to get a hold of the podcast, we can be reached at rhodesscholar80@gmail.com. That's ROADS and 80, or on Twitter at Court Syllabus.